Hello, good evening. Welcome to Teach-A-Thon Day 13. I believe it's day 13 in it. So, welcome to Teach-A-Thon Day 13. We're set to have a lovely time. Um, and please, if you are online with me, just let me know in the comment section that you are live with me so that I can let me know where you're watching from as usual. So I see Temitope Ayonyemi. I see Osai Daniel Chukudi. Nice to meet you. I see Nifesi Adefila. These are my YouTube squad. Welcome. Um, Today I don't have so much time at my disposal. But let's do something before we continue. If you are online with me, take the next 10 seconds. There's an arrow button right under the video. Click that arrow button, copy the link, and share it. Let people know that we are live. Let people know that we are live. I'll wait. You have about 10 seconds to do that. Ati is also here with us. Ati is watching from Abuja. That much I know. All right. And then on Mixlr, let me see what my Mixlr family is doing. What is my Mixlr family doing? Let me see. So just share this video as much as you can. And let's have a lovely time. All right. So today, I will attempt to give a defense for God and then move right into. So I'm going to answer three things in the next 45 minutes, which should give me 15 minutes to talk about each thing. The first one is how can we logically defend our belief that there is a God? The second one is, if there is a good God, why do bad things happen in the world? If there is a good God, why do bad things happen in the world? And then the last that I would like to talk about is how can we truly tell that Jesus Christ is the God of the universe? He's the God that created all things. How can we truly tell that the Christian God is God? So we're going to try to answer all those three questions in this very short live stream, which means I'm just going to go rapid fire. So number one, how can we logically give a defense for the existence of God? I'm going to talk about 2 points. 2 points that would help us understand before I start with that part, let me say this, or let me start with the other aspects where I talk about if there is a good God, why is there so much evil in the world? And the answer to that question is very simple. There's so much evil in the world because we live in a fallen world, all right? We live in a fallen world, and we live in a fallen world with fallen men. And there's something you need to understand, and what you need to understand is this, that the sovereignty of God, the omnipotence of God, does not mean that God controls everything. Any faith or system of belief that leaves responsibility for things absolutely up to God is irresponsible. I want you to write that down somewhere. I first heard it from Bishop David Oyedepo, and it has to be one of the best quotes on faith I have heard from him. Any faith that leaves total responsibility to God is an irresponsible faith. All right. So, Dr. Ravi Zacharias of blessed memory would often say that every question about God's goodness is asked by a man, and it's usually about another man. Every question about God's goodness is asked by a man, and it's usually about another man. If there is a good God, why are people suffering in this world? If there is a good God, why should Saddam Hussein do all he did in Iraq? If there is a good God, why should Osama bin Laden do all he did? If there is a good God, why did Adolf Hitler murder all the people he murdered? And we fail to realize that all of those problems are existent because of man. And even some things that we call natural disasters occur because of the activities of man. All right. So if you would do me a favor after this, just go and Google the progression of the changes in the map of the world. All right. So you would realize we didn't have as many continents as we have now. We just had land and we had water. And then as man acted upon the land, we began to have the shifts in tectonic plates. If you remember from geography, they told you that what caused the shifts in tectonic plates was usually the activities of man. All right, and that was what caused. And then what is an earthquake? An earthquake is when two tectonic plates rub against one another. So it's usually the activities of man that lead to these events. And then you have tsunamis, which are basically earthquakes underwater that create this tidal wave that is very high, and then affects the surrounding settlements around it. So if you look at the map, the rate of change of the map of the world, you would realize that the map began to change faster, around the time when industrialization was a thing. I saw, in fact, something you can do right now is you can just Google the difference. You can Google Lake Chad 30 years ago and Lake Chad today. The pictures are fantastic, right? Lake Chad used to be this very large body of water, right? But now Lake Chad is not up to 1/5 of its size. Most of it has dried up because of global warming, because of the depletion of the ozone layer. And we know that the depletion of the ozone layer is largely due to the burning of fossil fuels and the use of chlorofluorocarbons and all of that. So when we say, if there is a good God, why is there so much suffering in the world? We have to ask ourselves, how much of that question allows us to be accountable for our own actions? How much of that question allows us to be accountable for the hunger in less privileged societies that exists due to the greed of man and industrialization and communism or socialism? How much of that question allows and accounts for the behavior of man? I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but a lot of people have been complaining about the COVID-19 vaccines, on how many of the vaccines aren't as effective as they ought to be. And please, if you haven't been vaccinated, I believe you ought to, or I think you should try and get vaccinated. But some people are saying, oh, these vaccines are a hoax. And then a lot of big people, like big governmental bodies, are coming out to say the vaccines are a hoax, it was all a lie. There isn't. So think about the fact that the whole world went into a lockdown. Now some places are still in lockdown right now. The whole world has been in lockdown for 3 years, 4 years, and it's all a hoax. It's all because some people wanted to pocket some extra amount of money, whatever reason it was. So we then begin to ask ourselves, if there is a good God, why is there so much evil in the world? Every time we ask that question, we must of a necessity ask ourselves, how much of my question allows for the responsibility of man in the goings on, around us? How much of my question admits and allows for man to be accountable for his own actions? Or am I just assuming that man doesn't have any part to play? Are we just playing victim? Accuse God. He's a big boy. He can handle it. So there's so much evil in the world because we live in a fallen world with fallen men, you see. But then how can we logically give a defense for the existence of God? I'll talk about two things. I'll talk about intelligent design, and then I'll talk about the moral arguments leading to meaning. The moral arguments leading to meaning. So I'll talk about those two things, and then we will continue from there. So let's talk about intelligent design. Intelligent design is very intuitive. It's a very easy thing, easy concept to understand, and it's this: if there is an intelligent design, then there is an intelligent designer. All right. So if you look at my hoodie, the strings of my hoodie are knotted. Right? They are knotted. Now, most hoodies don't come with knotted strings. Is that correct? Demand that. Sorry, 1 second. Is it better now? Are we back? So the rules of logic demand that if something exists and it looks well put together like this, somebody made it happen. You know what I mean? If something exists and it looks, are we back? Are we good? All right. Then something made it happen. It didn't just fall from the sky. And that's the issue of intelligent design. If I told you, this is a physical hard copy Bible. So this is a physical hard copy Bible, right? And it has over 1,000 words easy inside of it, right? So imagine if I told you, so how this Bible was made. This Bible was printed, let's say it was printed in Zondervan, their printing press. So there was an explosion in their printing press, and they came out, and the Bible was just right there floating in the sky. You know, you wouldn't believe that. So if we say that man is so intricately designed, and he is, man is so intricately designed. If we say that man is so intricately designed, and not just man, the universe is so intricately designed, then we must believe in an intelligent designer. All right. So, for instance, the earth is just at the perfect location from the sun. If it's too close, it'd be too hot. If it's too far, it'd be too cold. If it was just a little bit farther than it is, it'd be too cold. If it was just a little bit closer than it is, it'd be too hot. So the amount of intentionality we see in the creation of the universe and in the creation of the earth must point to the existence of a creator, an intelligent designer. Do you understand? That's the first argument. That's the very first argument. No scientist would believe that an iPhone happened because of months upon months of evolution, Any scientist that looks at an iPhone would say it was beautifully engineered, to be what it is. So if we won't believe that things that are like this, that are less engineered than the human body, all right, were engineered, if we won't believe that they weren't engineered, then we shouldn't believe that the human body wasn't engineered. Do you understand? That's just logic. It's simple logic. But number two, like I said, I'm speeding through the conversation. But number two argument, or number two defense for the existence of a God, is moral law. Moral law. And I think it was Dr. Ravi Zacharias or Nabil Qureshi, both of them are now late, but I heard them say this. Every time we ask the question, if there is a good God, why is there so much evil in the world? We must answer a question first. What is the meaning of good? Second question, where does that definition of good come from? Do you understand? What is the meaning of good, and where does that definition of good come from? There are different kinds of societies. You have heterocratic societies where the many are in charge of the few. Do you understand? Heterocratic societies. You have autocratic societies where the few are in charge of the many. Democracy is in some form a merge between heterocracy and autocracy. All right. So under autocracy, you have oligarchy. All these things you learned in social studies and you learned in school. So under autocracy, you have something like oligarchy, where you have the rich in charge of the people. Then you have the monarchy, where you have select kings that are in charge of the people. And then you have under the heterocracy, you have democracy, all right, where the people, it's a government for the people, of the people, and by the people, all right. So the people elect a leader, a representative, and then the leader leads them. And then you have a theocratic society where God is king. Now, if we live in a heterocratic society, we face a problem. And this is the problem, and we see it in the world today, everywhere. We quickly realize that according to humans, there is no objective good and objective evil, according to humans. What that means is, what is sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. But at the same time, one man's meat is another man's poison. And so what may be good to me may not be good to you. So according to humans, we realize that there is no objective good and there is no objective evil. Do you understand this? There is no objective good and there is no objective evil. This creates a problem in itself within humanity. If there is no objective good, there is no objective evil, there is no meaning. Do you understand? We live in a polar world, a world of good and evil. If there is no objective good and there is no objective evil, there is no meaning. So I remember, I think a couple of days ago when we were having this conversation about Teach-A-Thon, when we were having a conversation and I took us down this thought process that imagine if you could live forever, right, in this world and do whatever you wanted to do. And at first it may seem like it's the kind of life you want to live. I mean, I can eat when I want without consequences. I can kill whoever I want to kill without consequences, because that's an extreme variation of that. I can sleep with whomever without consequences. I can do whatever I want to do without consequences. But very quickly, you begin to realize that maybe your first 100 years you had fun, your first 200 years you had fun, but forever is forever, right? And so at some point, it begins to lose meaning, right? If there is no objective good and there is no objective evil, there's no objective meaning. There's no meaning to life. We derive satisfaction in rewards and consequences. Do you understand? Why do we get up every day? I mean, why do we get up every day and go to work to make money? Why are we making money? Because you do realize that you can pack up your things, move to the village, live under a tree, or live in a cave, live, like our early fathers did, pluck from the bush and eat. So the basic necessities and needs of man will be met. You have shelter because you live under a cave. You have food. You've been plucking fruits. You're a gatherer of fruits. You eat vegetables from the farm and from outside. And then for clothing, pick up leaves, cover your essentials. Right? Every human being can do that. But we created money because money is a man-made thing. We created money to be a reward system. In fact, the social media industry thrives on this knowledge. The very fact that man lives for reward. Do you understand? Man lives for reward. I was reading an article this morning about TikTok and how TikTok is cocaine, but digital cocaine. Digital hard drugs. People get hooked on it. You're scrolling video after video. And when you scroll, two things happen. Number one, you are presented with a life that you can live, an alternate life that is different from yours, that right now is not as rewarding as you hope it should be, right? And then number two, when you're presented with that possibility and you swallow that possibility, you begin to desire to live that life. And so you start making new costumes, dressing in new ways, learning new dance steps, learning new accents, learning new slangs, learning new things, so that you can put out a video and get likes, get follows, get comments, and when you get those things, you feel rewarded for all your efforts. So you have basically people who have such a large following online who deep down within know it's a facade, because none of those people who follow you, or not many of those people who follow you online, actually follow you, right? But we love the fact that the numbers keep growing, because the numbers are sort of like a show, a reward for the false life that we've been sold and that we bought and we lived. Yet the whole point of humanity revolves around reward and punishment. Do you understand? And so when somebody wakes up to say, if there is a good God, why is there so much evil in the world? You ask the person a simple question. What is good? By what standards are you defining good? You can't say by human standards, because humans don't have a generic definition of good. Do you get what I'm saying? So there's this person I follow on Facebook, and he's a storyteller, and he specializes in telling true crime stories. So not just true crime, but bizarre stories. And sometimes when I hear some of the stories, I'm like, people did this? People do this? I mean, somewhere in Ibadan, just Ibadan, right here, our neighbor in Lagos, somewhere in Ibadan, there was this, you can just Google it, it's called the Soka something. There was this house where they discovered it was a human parts facility. So they kidnap people, take them there, butcher them, and send them out. And to those people, what they were doing wasn't that bad because it was a means to an end. And so you'd realize that with humans, good and evil is very subjective. Do you understand? Good and evil is very, very subjective. So by what standards do you judge God to be good? When you say if there is a good God, how can there be so much evil in this world? I mean, I don't think Adolf Hitler thought what he was doing was evil. So when you say, oh, but there's a name for those kind of people, they are psychopaths. I watched a TED Talk a couple of years ago, and the basic TED Talk was all of us are psychopaths. Because by the things that we use to define psychopaths, we've exhibited some psychopathic traits once or twice in our lives. Do you understand? Many Nigerians wouldn't want to admit this, but many Nigerians are hoping, when the current president assumed his office, hoped he would die there. Hoped he will die, let him die. And then, so now you have a problem because somebody killed Jews en masse. But here you are praying that somebody dies, And so it seems to me that you are okay with death, especially if you are not the one dealing it. But you don't realize that if you wish someone dead, you are just one step away from taking the person's life. Because before the action is the intent, the wish, the desire. So if you've desired the person dead, you've basically taken a life. That's what Jesus was saying. If you look at a woman lustfully, you've committed adultery. You are one step away from the action. And being precedes doing. So whatever you've been thinking precedes whatever you are doing. Do you understand? With humanity, good and evil is subjective. This raises a very important question. There are certain things that all of humanity agrees is evil. Do you get? So, if all of humanity agrees that this thing is evil, and yet humanity is subjective in the agreement of good and evil, then our knowledge of good and evil must come from an external source. It must come from an external moral lawgiver who has programmed, as it were, the heart of man to think, in a certain direction about a thing. Do you understand? And that's the argument of the moral lawgiver. That's the argument of the existence of God. If there is good and evil, if we know that there are things that are good, there are things that are evil, then we agree that there must be, if we agree that there's morality, then we agree that there must be in some form, in some sense, a moral lawgiver. Morality cannot just be subject to culture, because some cultures are not good. There are cultures where people eat people. There are cultures where people kill people. Do you understand? So some cultures aren't that good. So if morality cannot be subjective, morality has to be objective, on a grand scale for all humans to submit themselves to a generic idea of good and evil. Do you get it? And this is what divides the world. This is what rules the world. This is what runs the world. This is why in almost every movie we watch, there has to be a protagonist and an antagonist. There has to be a main character in almost every movie who is good, and somebody who is seeking their downfall, who is evil. And we rejoice when the good person triumphs and when the evil person doesn't, even though in reality it's not always that way. And so when Solomon observed life and realized the good doesn't always triumph, the evil doesn't always get punished, he said, vanity upon vanity, all is vanity. The world is vain. There is no point to anything. What's the point of working hard, Solomon says, and amassing so much wealth only to leave it for somebody who you are not sure will be an idiot? Because he says who you are not sure will be foolish. And he was speaking prophetically because his sons turned out to be foolish. They squandered all his money. Do you get it? So all of it was vain. And this is the reason why, and I'm just segueing into the third question now. How can we be sure that the Christian God is the true God? This is the reason why almost every religion out there deals with the question of meaning. Are you following? Religion seeks to answer the question of meaning. What is the meaning of life? What is the meaning of humanity? Why are we here? Meaning and purpose. Do you get it? Meaning and purpose. And because meaning and purpose are tied intricately to good and evil, and not just good and evil, but the reward of good and the punishment of evil, then religion seeks to answer the question of good and evil. But here's something you need to understand. At its most basic form, good is not truly rewarded here, and evil is not truly punished here. Why? Saddam Hussein was a dictator and a mass murderer. He killed people. He did chemical weapons testing on people, so I heard. And he wasn't a very generally good guy, right? And so there was a time the US military was looking for this guy, and I think they looked for him for a space of 2 years or 3 years. So if you've watched, okay, I think the other movie, this movie I'm about to talk about, is about Osama bin Laden, all right, and who they also hunted for a space of about 3 years. Osama bin Laden. So if you've watched this movie, Zero Dark 30, it's actually the story of how they hunted Osama bin Laden, right? And this guy wasn't a great guy. He had bombed the Twin Towers, killing hundreds of people, and 3 or 4 other destinations in the United States on the same day. So he was generally a terrorist. And they caught him. And they made him face, I think they made him face a firing squad. I can't remember. But I remember I was young and we all watched the TV that day. It was televised and the whole world watched as they killed Osama bin Laden. And they made him face a firing squad as punishment for his crimes. And I remember thinking to myself, even as a young boy, that how is this punishment for his crimes? A firing squad lasts less than 5 minutes because you have an array of soldiers, usually about 6 or 10 of them. They gather and then they point their guns at you and they shoot. And some researchers have shown bullets usually travel faster than the speed of sound. And so the thing about a bullet is if a bullet is shot at your head, you won't hear the sound of the bullet. You won't. Because if immediately the bullet goes through your head, you're brain dead, which means your ear can't process the sound it's hearing. If they shoot your heart, you may hear the sound of the bullet because your brain is still functioning, 4 minutes after your heart stops working, because it takes 4 minutes for oxygen, for the brain to begin to tell that oxygen is gone and then shut down. So it takes 4 minutes for a person to drown, for instance. So if a bullet goes through your heart, your brain still works for about 4 minutes before it stops working. But if it goes through your head, it dies immediately, just goes off, right? So Osama bin Laden probably died an instant death. Like fire, and that was it. That was the last thing he heard. He didn't hear the sound of the bullet. Fire and the bullets went through his head and he was gone. As far as deaths go, that's a more merciful death than somebody who died of cancer in the hospital. For instance, Nabil Qureshi was an apologist who went about, he was a Muslim turned Christian who went about giving defense for the Christian faith, especially to the Muslim community. He died of cancer. All right. He battled with cancer for, I think, a space of a year before he died. This is chemotherapy months and months of chemotherapy. And chemotherapy is just basically exposure to radiation. So you're being exposed to radiation, and the radiation is supposed to target the cancer and kill the cancer cells. But here's the problem: the radiation in itself is not good for your body. So you begin to have symptoms, you begin to vomit, you begin to have many symptoms. Your hair begins to fall off, you lose weight, all of those things. So here is Nabil Qureshi, who was a devout Christian, loved the Lord, went about doing God's work, and he died slowly for a space of a year. Or Chadwick Boseman, who acted Black Panther, dying slowly for a space of a year, right? And yet, Osama bin Laden's punishment was death, a faster death than Nabil Qureshi. There's no meaning to that. There's no real sense to that. If you think about it, there is no real sense to that. There is no real sense to a rapist raping someone, and then the woman has to bear the burden of her rape all her life, because now she's pregnant. Now she wants to carry that child. She wants to give birth. And while she loves the child, she hates the child, because the child is a reminder of her trauma, is a reminder of her rape. But in some countries, the penalty for rape is death. So immediately the man dies. And that's it. You see, I don't have a problem with the law system. But if you look at humanity, you will realize there is no meaning to life within life. Do you understand? There is no meaning to life within life. And this is why almost every religion out there seeks to speak about an afterlife. Do you get? Because if we are trying to answer the question of meaning, we're trying to answer the question of purpose, we're trying to answer the question of good and evil, and the reward of good and the punishment of evil, and we've realized after deep thought that nothing in this world holds water. There is no real good in this world. There's no real punishment for evil in this world, and there is no real reward for good in this world. And if there is no reward for good, then how can we say that good is good? And if there is no punishment for evil, do you understand? Do you get the question? Like, this is actually existential. Like, you have to actually think about those things. So many of these religions come up with what is called an afterlife. So it's called different names in different places: a world, a time, a reality above or beyond this particular reality, where everything is right, where good is truly rewarded and evil is truly punished. You can call it paradise, you can call it heaven, you can call it hell, you can call it there are many names. Do you understand? I think in Buddhism or Hindu, it's called nirvana. You get a state of perfect peace, a state of perfect enlightenment, when you are fully known yourself and then you are satisfied in yourself. So there are many religions that have many promises of an afterlife, a life after this one, where good is rewarded and evil is punished. And we can see why that's necessary, because if none of those things are true, my life has no meaning. Your life has no meaning. Do you understand? Let me put it in another way that may make sense to you. The meaning of a thing is usually, or the purpose or the value of a thing is many times most determined in its absence. Do you understand? The value of a thing is many times most determined in its absence. So if I'm short-sighted, right? Maybe all my life I wasn't, some people are born, with clear eyesight, but as they grow older, their eyesight begins to deteriorate. And so my eyesight begins to deteriorate. And so all my life I never valued eyeglasses. I never needed them. I never knew the meaning. I never valued it until my eyes needed them. And so the absence of eyeglasses started to mean something to me. Do you understand? And so when I got the eyeglasses, the value of the eyeglasses is felt in its absence. Do you understand? So I will always carry my glasses around, because if I don't carry my glasses, I can't see. The value of the glasses are felt in their absence. The value of things are felt in their absence. So the true meaning of life, or the true value of life is felt when life is no more. That's why everybody seeks to leave a legacy behind while they are still here, while they still can. Because when you die, you no longer have the opportunity to do anything. And so when you die, the true meaning of your life will be laid bare before you. If I lived 70 years on the earth, and in all of those 70 years, all I did was work, eat, I didn't care for my family, I didn't do anything, and then I die, and and there's a form of consciousness. Let's say there's a form of consciousness. I will then look back at my 70 years and say, I wasted my 70 years. But if out of those 70 years, I just coasted along for the first 65 years, but the last 5 years of my life, I spent it with family, I made my family happy, I can then say I lived my life for my family. I left my family with something. My life wasn't meaningless. It wasn't valueless. Do you get? I meant something to someone. I meant something to people. That's life. And so everybody keeps asking, what happens when I die? Where do I go when I die? Because in the end, when I die, I would then be able to evaluate what I did while I was here. While you were in school, it was all fun and games. And you weren't really thinking about the value of the things you were doing. You weren't really thinking about the value of the things you were doing while you were in school. So while you were in school, they will ask you to submit an assignment, and you will run and you will submit the assignment, or you will stay up all night and do an assignment and submit it, because somewhere you were just driven by this fear that I will fail. But you never really knew the magnitude or how much your failure in school will affect your life until you left school and entered the employment market. And then you started to realize, my God, imagine if I didn't do well in school. These are the odds that would be against me. These are the things I would have to face. And so your time spent in school is validated, as it were, or evaluated, as it were, after you've left school. Which means in this world, the good you have done or the evil you have done will truly be evaluated after you are gone. Do you get what I'm saying? Some people, in the moment, at the time they were doing some things, it looked evil. But then they went, and then the world realized it may have looked evil when he was doing it, but it actually turned out to be good. Do you get that? And this is why almost every religion preaches an afterlife. Now, like I will always say, the reason why we believe in the Christian faith above other faiths is because, like every other religion, the Christian faith preaches an afterlife. The Christian faith professes that there is an afterlife. The Christian faith professes that there is a life after here where good is rewarded and evil is punished. The Christian faith does that. But with every other religion, we don't have definitive proof of the afterlife. All right. So, apologies for the break in transmission. We are currently experiencing technical difficulties with the sound. So let's see. Let's see. Apologies for the break in transmission. We've been experiencing some technical difficulties, but we are back. And allow me to just plead with you, if you are online and you are watching a stream and we encounter an issue, please be patient. A couple of people are working on it to make it work. We will appreciate if everyone was more patient, just so we can achieve what we need to achieve. So this is what I was saying before the stream was cut off. This is what I was saying before the stream was cut off. If every religion claims that there is an afterlife, and the Christian faith is basically the one religion that says, I've been there, I've seen it, and I've come back to tell you that it is true, then the Christian faith must be the true faith. All right. And so we must ask, was there any proof given by any other religion about the afterlife? And that proof is the resurrection of Jesus. So why do we believe in Jesus? We believe in Jesus because he was raised from the dead. The entire Christian faith hinges on the resurrection of Jesus. We don't just believe in Jesus because that's what we were brought up with. We believe in Jesus because he was raised from the dead. Paul says, if Christ be not raised from the dead, we are of all men most miserable. Do you see that? If Christ be not raised from the dead, we are of all men most miserable. And so the entirety of the Christian faith is hinged on the resurrection of Jesus. So we believe in Jesus because in Jesus, the question of meaning, the question of purpose, the question of good and evil is totally answered. I'm going to stop here and I'm going to leave the floor open for the next 2 minutes or 1 minute. If you have a question, please ask your question. If anyone has a question in the room, please ask your question. We don't have all the time to do all the branches of apologetics. Apologetics is such a wide conversation. I mean, there is a defense for the Christian faith with respect to Muslims, with respect to atheists, with respect to agnostics, and all of these things differ. There is a way to talk to them. But let me say something. 2 things. Whenever you're talking to somebody who doesn't believe in what you believe, and while I say this, if you've got questions, please use the comment section. Whenever you're talking to someone who doesn't believe in what you claim to believe, especially the Christian faith, the first thing you must realize is that there are mindsets that you must look out for, things you must consider. Some people are not talking to you because they want answers. Some people are talking to you because they just want to argue. They like poking at you. And a lot of Christians get very triggered when people just, poke. And so you must be careful how you talk to such a person. Some people are talking to you because they genuinely need answers. And so to those ones, you will give answers. But there are people who are talking to you because they want to disprove your faith. To those ones, you give a defense and leave it at that. All right. The second mentality you need to realize is anybody whose faith you are trying to correct, you're trying to prove to someone that Jesus is the Christ, you must also take into cognizance the fact that these people are going to be leaving a lot to join what you claim to believe. All right. Some people are going to leave family. Some people are going to leave friends. Some people are going to transition from, a certain lifestyle to another. And so you must be considerate about their lifestyle changes and what you are preaching to them would entail as far as a lifestyle change is concerned. You must be considerate about that and factor that in the way you speak to them. So don't just speak harshly, don't just be brash, and let there be compassion in your tone. Don't just drop facts. You're not trying to win an argument. Do you understand? You're not trying to win an argument. Don't just say XYZ or you drop your own. Don't do that. You must be considerate in the way you speak to people. All right. But for now, this is as far as I will go with apologetics, in the area of faith and logic. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about faith versus foolishness. We'll talk about faith versus foolishness. And I'm going to start talking about having faith for things. I spent some time talking about that last Thursday at the midweek service, but I'm going to talk about that more explicitly. I'm going to spend more time talking about it tomorrow. Having faith for things, having faith for health, having faith for financial resources, having faith for things. And we're going to have a lovely time. But until then, without any further questions, I love you guys. I'll see you tomorrow. God bless you.